Welcome to the Homeschool Together podcast. Where one working mom and a stay-at-home dad help you navigate the nuts and bolts of the growing and dynamic world of homeschooling.
With a focus on early learners, like me.
All the ins and outs of building and maintaining your homeschool life.
Homeschool.
Find out tips and tricks to make things like this easier.
I'm reading.
And ultimately, enjoy educating your kids. And what's that last thing?
Have fun together. Did I do good, Daddy?
Yeah, you did, sweetie. Good job. Hello and welcome to Homeschool Together. Thanks so much for joining us. If you had a chance, head down to the show notes and we'll have all the links to our social media, YouTube channel. It's getting very active over there. Ariel's Instagram is on fire, as the young kids say.
Yeah, right.
Speaking of learning new things, I know a lot of us are very nervous about certain subjects, and we have anxieties that have been built up over the last decades of our own life and our own education, and now all of a sudden we're the home educator for our own kids, and teaching them basic addition and subtraction is easy, but then all of a sudden it's 6th grade and you're teaching them civics, and now it's 8th grade and you're teaching them geometry, and now it's 10th grade and my gosh, we're making jet fuel in the kitchen. There are things that people are scared about teaching. They are concerned that they can't teach. There's a lot of anxiety about these subjects. Like, I know from my side, teaching physics is going to be an easy thing for me. Teaching upper level math,
the physics major.
Yeah, and upper level math, calculus 1, 2, and 3, very easy, straightforward, very easy. Differential equations, no problem.
Very easy,
no problem.
Barely an inconvenience.
Linear algebra, barely an inconvenience. We can get there, right? But I know a lot of people out there are not that, right?
Well, and even us, I think that even the STEM education that we have, there are going to be things that we feel, I think we would feel pretty uncomfortable teaching poetry.
Body anatomy, go see mom.
Yeah, that's true. We have girls, so, but there are subjects, even though we are well educated, we do have bachelor's degrees, there are subjects even we feel uncomfortable teaching.
Yeah, poetry is one that I really struggle with. Yeah.
Yeah, I did not do well in chemistry. You did better than I did, but I would feel uncomfortable teaching that subject, even though I do have a STEM degree. I did take college chemistry, but it didn't go well, folks. Yeah. So,
biology, I ran away from that in high school.
Oh, absolutely.
I tried not to take that. Yeah.
I would feel really uncomfortable teaching biology
or a foreign language. I'm just notoriously terrible.
Yeah, same. Right. I speak very, very marginal French. I think the very first thing that we want to talk about with this is it doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter how well educated, you think that we know a friend who's got I think she's got a master's degree and in something very academic. I don't remember what it is, but it
was like a poli-sci.
It was very impressive. And she's very worried about teaching her son middle school science.
Yeah.
Right. So it doesn't matter how well educated you are. There are gaps in all of our educations or places where we did struggle. And we worry about that. So I think the first thing is, move beyond. We have to kind of put away our past baggage of, oh man, I really struggled in chemistry and I almost failed that class kind of thing. I don't think I can do this. We have to put aside our own stuff and kind of look at this as our kids and not feel like there's this stigma that goes with us. If you're a mom or dad and you just have a high school diploma and you struggled in some areas, don't think that you cannot teach high school level material, because you can.
Yeah.
And just, we all have these feelings about at least one, if not multiple subjects. I feel this way about multiple subjects.
Especially the upper level thing. I know, educating a younger child is, fairly straightforward. A lot of times it's just follow the lessons, read the books, do the work, and you're fine. But you're right. When you get up to those upper level things, we start to have that feeling that there is sacred knowledge, that there's the only way to teach those is I have to have an upper level degree or something like that. And that might be true for just maybe a couple very small subjects, mainly being in the STEM areas like math and physics, but I don't think it's an insurmountable task for most people.
Yeah, I don't think it is. And, even though we do try to focus on younger learners as our children are younger, one of
We're already thinking of this.
this
what's coming
fear, though, about how do you teach subjects in middle school and high school, it prevents people in even early elementary grades from starting homeschooling because they're thinking like, I don't want to start on this path if I'm not going to be able to follow through when we get into higher levels.
Yeah, I think you brought it up the other day where it was like, oh, we'll homeschool except high school.
And a lot of people say that, which is totally fine if that's your plan. But we don't want anyone to be scared of these subjects and think like, oh, I should not start down on this homeschooling path because there's going to get to be a point where this is too tough for me because, oh, I'm not good in math, or, I struggled a lot with reading and literature, and I don't think I'm really equipped to teach, literature composition and things like that. I mean, whatever it is, whatever your Achilles heel, and we've all got something in our academic history that we are uncomfortable with.
Hey, listen, AAR, all about reading too, is kicking my butt with phonics.
Yeah, he keeps sharing things with me. He's like, babe, did
you know there were 4 sounds for the letter Y? What?
Yeah.
And for O. My goodness, this language is kooky.
Yeah, he keeps coming out going, who designed this language? This is so tough. So I guess let's just ground it here that we all have these issues. Everybody does. Whether you're a new homeschooler or a veteran, everyone has these areas that give them concern or that they know are going to be more of a struggle for them to teach. So don't feel less than or anything else because you've got some area that you feel uncomfortable about, because we all do.
Well, and it's a feeling of being overwhelmed, especially, if you're educating multiple kids and maybe that first kid is walking into, 14 or 15 years old or starting into the high school years. You can feel that sense of, impending doom or being overwhelmed on those type of things, especially if you're managing the house and you're managing the education and you're managing, new curriculum that you haven't seen before, or you're about to embark on, geometry, whatnot. And that's really scary. I mean, that can be overwhelming. I think the key thing is to not be overwhelmed and understand that, this is absolutely something you can do and it's achievable. It does require a little bit of learning potentially. And we'll go through a few of those things. It requires
some strategy. Let's put it that way. It's a challenge and it's going to be a strategy.
Strategery.
I think the first thing is to be comfortable with it and know that this exists and it's not insurmountable. And second is to acknowledge to your kids that maybe this is an area that mommy or daddy is not as familiar with. Right. And that gives us an opportunity to, be transparent with our kids, to learn alongside them, to kind of take that journey with them.
Learning alongside is, I think, a great.
Right. Yeah. And I think we should look at this as an opportunity, right? If you struggled with, I'm going to use math because math is one that a lot of people say they feel uncomfortable about. If you struggled with math in school, take this as a great opportunity to revisit that and maybe learn it in a better way. We've seen, we're doing Right Start Math and we're really loving it. And also Math Mammoth, they're both great. We've been doing both programs kind of interchange,
sequentially.
Yeah, we've been doing them both. We've been switching off. So, both of those programs are fabulous and they teach math in such an accessible, logical way. Maybe you didn't have good math instruction when you were a child. This might be the opportunity for you to learn alongside your child, figure it out together, and bring yourself up at the same time so that you're like, math, I got that. Maybe you will feel comfortable too. So this is a great opportunity to learn, especially I'm more concerned about like those subjects that our daughters are going to choose that we have like no idea about, that we never studied. That's another part of it too. What if you never covered that, whatever it is that they want to learn? All these same strategies are going to apply for that thing. You have no idea what this is about.
Well, yeah, I mean, think about all the history stuff that maybe you've never touched, and outside of your own country's, history. What if your child takes an interest in Japanese history or Chinese history? That's something I don't have a lot of familiarity with.
Our public schools never went beyond World War II. They acted like the United States history stopped at World War II. We never learned about Korea or Vietnam or any of the era of the 60s and 70s civil rights movement. We never learned about any of that in our public schools.
Yeah, you'd have to pick it up on the side.
Yeah, we have to learn that as adults. So, it could be any subject. Really. So let's get started talking about strategies.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the first thing you need to do is understand if you are the person that needs to be teaching this, right? There are so many resources and so many opportunities out there. Understanding, first of all, am I the right person to do this, or do I need to outsource this action?
Right. Is this something that you can pick up and learn? And I think a great way to do that is to take a look at some books about the subject, maybe some popular curriculums. You can take a look at sample lessons. See, is this primarily is this something that you've covered before? If it's a math topic in elementary or high school, you've probably covered in the past, but you just don't remember it. Like, hey, we've all been there. And you could learn it again, then you're probably the right person to teach this. If this is like my daughter wants to learn Japanese, I'm clearly the wrong person to teach this, because while I could learn with her, I could not teach her like proper pronunciation and that kind of stuff. Same thing with like a musical instrument. If my daughter wants to learn to play violin, I am going to be hopelessly inadequate because I do not play the violin. So you have to kind of be realistic about what you could teach. But don't be too hard on yourself either, especially with elementary subjects, even middle school and a lot of high school subjects. You can teach this if you pick up a book and read through a lesson or two. Does it make sense to you? Could you review it and then teach it? But it is an important assessment because you kind of have to decide which road are you going down. Are you going to outsource it or are you going to tackle it?
Yeah. And I think with the wealth of resources that we have now with, libraries, the internet, YouTube, things of that nature, we can, get access to a lot of materials and we can learn along. You can take classes on, many of the myriad class options. I know like there's Udemy, there's a few others.
Yeah, there's OutSchool
and everything. So you can take classes and learn. Like, I was eyeing a class the other day I'd like to learn a little bit about the Unreal Engine, which is a video gaming open source platform, and I want to learn about it. I want to learn how to make stuff in it. And I was like, the first thing I went and looked for a class. Like, there's got to be like a $25 class that will teach me the basics, and there was, right? Like, understand that maybe outsourcing that. We've heard this from a few of the last unschooling journeys and the homeschooling journeys, that especially with the older students, that they leverage these classes a lot.
That's right.
We all, I think we mentioned in the last unschooling journeys that, stripping away that understanding of, we just let our kids do whatever they want. But a lot of times letting them do whatever they want means getting them into an online class that they can learn about those things that they want to do. Right. And we've heard this from these parents that leveraging resources, leveraging the internet may be the right way to go.
Right.
Another way to go too is like, I'm looking at them right here. The Cliff Notes has incredible books on various math subjects, science subjects, biology.
Right. Those are even teacher guides for you. Yeah. If you feel like you're going to read, let's talk about like it's high school literature, let's say. Yeah. If you're going to read classics or anything that has a Cliff Notes, you can use that to help build your teacher knowledge. Yeah. And I would find that really tough. Personally, you're really good with literature. I mean, I like to read, but I would be really bad about like interpreting the nuance of liture. I need something like that.
That's a trick that I've done since high school. And my English teacher, clutched his pearls, and when I told him I'd like to read the Cliff Notes along with the book, and I actually read the Cliff Notes ahead of the time. So I read the narrative and the commentary, and then I go and read the actual text. And it takes care of three things that you have to do when you read something that's difficult, like literature, which is understanding the text, like what's happening, understanding the meaning, and a lot of times overcoming language differences. Especially if the book was written 100, 150 years ago, it may be in a style that we don't, expect from, say, Stephen King or the latest, throwaway paperback. The language is different. And overcoming those three things at the same time is very challenging. So I find taking the two hardest pieces, which is what is the narrative telling you and what is the meaning of what they're doing, having that already preloaded in your frontal cortex while you're reading the book allows you to enjoy the prose or the verse of what you're reading and also get what's happening and whatnot. So these are like little tricks, and you as an educator may pre-read those type of things,
right? So
that you can have those discussions with your learner, and then your learner may actually adopt that as well. So like, there's so many different ways you can attack these things.
Right. There's lots of different ways to do it. Yeah. I mean, when you think about a teacher, teachers are primarily taught how to, the educational process and how to manage the classroom and philosophy of education, all that kind of stuff. They often aren't taught like all the subjects that they have to teach. They have to learn that and then
Yeah.
teach it. And so you're kind of doing that same role on a micro scale, right? Because you only
Managing
have
curriculum, managing.
so you're learning this subject. I don't think they're going to school and learning, all of the advanced topics, but they get into a school and it's like, oh, can you teach science? Yeah, I could teach science. And then they're going to learn all that biology and then teach it to your kids.
Yeah, and that first
you can
year,
do this too.
Yeah, that
You
first
can
year or
also
two
learn.
might be rough for them, but after that, like 3 or 4 years old, I've been through this 3 or 4
Right.
times.
And they have curriculum that they use, and you will too. One of the things, so you got to assess first, right? Are you going to teach or are you going to outsource? If this is as long as it's not a skill-based thing, like an instrument, a language, coding.
Throwing the javelin so our daughter can join the Olympics in 10 years.
Yeah, we've been talking about that lately. She wants to be in the Olympics. She's trying to find we're trying to find the
Spoilers for what we're into this week.
Yeah, we're trying to find the least accident prone thing or, injury prone thing you could do. And I'm not sure if we have it yet, but anyways, that's an aside. You're deciding what you can do. If it's not a skill-based thing or something that, you couldn't teach, but if it is a core subject that you could learn and could teach, so you've decided you're going to teach it, review a few samples of curriculum. Not all curriculums are created equal. Obviously, we know there's some, work better with certain kids and work better with other kids. But not just that, some curriculums work better with some teachers and other teachers. We've looked at curriculums in the past. I remember like Singapore math, for example, was incredibly teacher friendly. You did not need to know anything in order to teach this. It was very laid out. So make sure that if you're going to tackle a subject, you've decided that you're going to teach it, that you find resources that support you best, whether it's Cliff Notes for literature or a math curriculum that, gives you a step-by-step teacher narrative, right? You'll find different curriculums for history that gives you all the questions. Here's exactly how to talk about it, just as if you were the teacher, So really finding the right materials to guide you is kind of the next step after you've decided you're going to take it on.
Absolutely. And then maybe following that, once you've figured out, if you can teach it, maybe the next step is to figure out if it's something your student can do on their own.
Right. Yeah. Even if you can do it, is your student old enough to do this independently?
And that's one of the things we've been hearing from some of these parents who've been educating older students is that, as they get older and they become more autonomous, they're able to sit down and do their workbook. They're able to sit down and do their, do a couple pages of this, write a little composition here, go off and read your book. And there's not as much prompting and as much guidance. You're more of like a basketball coach as opposed to say like, the Iditarod rider where you're whipping the horses to get them, whipping the dogs to get them moving down.
They whip the dogs.
Not anymore.
I'm sure they did.
Maybe they sternly yell at the dogs.
I hope they don't. Yeah, I think that
something like that, right?
If your child is older, we know some folks, for example, whose kids use Khan Academy, and those kids are independently doing their math. They're independently learning it. They're learning it through Khan Academy and other resources, and their child is old enough to do that themselves.
I honestly, God, I've gone through a bunch of Khan Academy videos and stuff, and I wish I had that when I was in high school. I wish I had that when I was in college. It teaches it
better than we could, and even though we feel comfortable.
It's not even just that, but like some of these resources, some of the math, some of the science stuff, Khan Academies, I think is a great example of this. It's when you're sitting in the lecture and your teacher's not like the best teacher.
Yeah,
and
that happens so often.
You so often want just to listen to it again from a different perspective. And being able to dial up a video that's like 30 or 40 minutes long, seeing a couple more example problems that are different from the ones you've seen worked out, and you just go, oh, that makes so much more sense. I understand what they said. I like how he explained this. And a lot of times it's the explanation is 90% of the learning. And if you don't have a good explainer, it can suffer. And, with STEM, that can be a little bit more challenging. History as well, right? Like, what do we always know? What's always the cliche about history? It's so dry. It's so boring, right? And the thing is that I've learned, in the last 10, 15 years with podcasts, history can be unbelievably interesting. And it's really just how it's being presented to you.
Absolutely. If your child is interested in something or you've got to teach a subject in history, we actually talked with we interviewed somebody the other day who was raised outside of the United States and now lives here. So she's like, I didn't learn U.S. history, right? What do you do in that situation? I'd say if your child's old enough, you can help them, go to the library, get books, find videos. They can do a lot of this work independently. And if something that you want to catch up on, you can do it with them. I think that's such a, what a magical journey. If our daughter wants to learn something that I have been wanting to learn or, feel like is a real deficit in my education, what a great time to do it together.
Exactly.
So, should you teach it? Can you teach it? Should you teach it? And, or should it be something that your child does independently? Or no, I shouldn't teach it. I've looked at the sample that, the first few lessons were over my head. It's not something that I can teach, or it's a skill that I don't have. I cannot teach my child how to play violin. Then you have to look outside. And we talked about OutSchool. We talked about Udemy.
Tutors.
Yeah, tutors are great. Tutors can also look in your homeschool community for older homeschool students who could tutor. You don't just have to go out to adults. There are tutoring centers and things, but you could also find other homeschoolers in your area. Think about taking classes at a co-op or signing up for some other type of a class that's offered, outside of your home. Right? There's all kinds of things. And maybe you could take it with your student. That's another one. Yeah. Lean into your community. In case of our daughter, she was asking about playing an instrument, and I just was like, "Oh, that's Grandpa's job because Grandpa plays a bunch of instruments. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to outsource that to him." So that's one thing that maybe I don't have to look for a specific class for. So you may have somebody in your family or on your street, a friend or another homeschool family that has the ability to teach that subject. And that's where community starts coming into to homeschool. So think about that.
And I think a lot of the challenges that we see is maybe something specific that is difficult, more acute. It's going to be harder to find somebody like a parent, like a grandpa who's going to teach the whole chemistry. Like that's going to be a little bit more of a challenge. You may have to. And I think the last point here is that it could be a blend of everything, right?
It sure could.
The student could be off watching some lectures. You come in with some additional materials to help assist. And maybe once in a while you bring in a tutor. Like it could be a blend of all those type of things. And you may want to take that type of approach. It's not just a one size fits all.
Absolutely. And, as we are homeschoolers, but we do have the ability to take a class at the public school. Maybe you want your child to take a chemistry lab, and so you drop them off at the high school for one class in chemistry.
I think chemistry is the one that we often hear repeated.
Because of the lab work.
It is such a facilities-related subject.
Although really, you can do a lot of chemistry in your kitchen, and they have
can.
some amazing sets to do at home.
Yeah.
But just remember that these are all options that are available to you. So aside from going outside, if you're going to teach it yourself, what are the steps to take? I think, we talked about reviewing the lessons to know that, this is going to work for you. But before you teach, I would say read at least one, if not two lessons ahead. Be very familiar with this subject matter so that you can confidently teach it. And this is what teachers do before they teach it to their classes in a regular public school setting. They have already reviewed the material. They're comfortable with it. They can present it confidently in a way that their students will understand.
And that's something I used to do as a tutor. I tutored calculus and physics at the local community college, way back in the Wayback Machine. And that was something I absolutely did. I was reviewing the materials. I knew what I was coming into. I asked them what they were learning that day. And so I would go ahead and review that. I'd try to match it to a book I had, try to review around it, like in front and behind, look at example problems, write down some example problems, and bring that with me to the lesson so that during that lesson we can answer questions, we can cover additional, I would think of like different ideas. So like of how to explain things and different examples, because these were working professionals who were taking stuff. And I was always trying to like figure out ways to, approach the subject in a way that they understood, right? In a manner that they understood. And, those are things that you'll have to do when you're in the, in the trenches with your kids. You're going to have to be creative and think about how you can present this in something that they enjoy or they understand. I think that was always something that really, I thought, keyed in. Like I had a nurse that I had to work with, and she didn't understand, really the rates of change and derivatives and all that stuff. And I was trying to explain to her, like, what happens if you were like titrating in, a saline bag and you had to like increase it over time. She started to understand, like, because I was able to, put it in terms that she would understand,
That's right.
all of a sudden the math started to make a little bit more sense.
It's really hard to put it.
So how do I teach calculus with Minecraft? I think the thing that we're hearing these days.
It's like, how do you teach something in the best way for your student if you're learning it side by side can be a challenge. Now, I love the idea of learning side by side with our kids, and maybe you discover it together and then you can kind of think of some other ways to bring it up, or you watch videos and you learn it together. And that's more kind of in the math state. There's, history and things, there's lots of fun ways to teach that, but the drier subjects like math, how do you, get into that? And if you're learning alongside with your learner, you can certainly do your best, but if you have time to preview the lesson and learn it first, then you'll be really sitting in a great position to be comfortable with it. So the other thing is how far to go. If you're not comfortable in a subject, how do you know how much to teach? This is a great place where standards come in. If you want to look at Common Core for English or math, of course, national standards, that will work, or your state standards. If you don't want to use standards, you can go to many popular curriculum providers and check out what their scope of each grade level is and know like, oh, okay, so, freshman biology is going to cover this to this. And if you can afford to get a curriculum and use that, that's great. If you have to piece something together yourself, at least you can use that scope and sequence to have an idea of, what you need to teach in what order. So that's a good place to look for, and that's also a good place to look just to assess whether you can teach it or not. Like, okay, these are all the things they're going to learn. How comfortable do I feel with all those topics? If I'm going to teach freshman biology, for example.
One that I've always wondered about is like a composition type of thing where you're writing small essays or themes.
Yeah, that one worries me a little bit.
It's very subjective. It always felt very
So
subjective in the writing style and whatnot, and understanding like, okay, I have a 10th grader or a 9th grader. What does a one-pager look like?
See, I think that's a great time for you to leverage potentially like a community college class or an out school or another class where you can submit that to somebody who has more English education. I feel like I could read something that our children wrote and say whether it was good or not, but I don't know that I could quantify like the why of it. It would be that I think is very difficult. Like you said, with STEM, it's the answer is correct or it's not correct, and we can find out in which step did the mistake happen if it's not right.
Yeah.
But with English Comp, how do you know? And how do you know what's typical for that grade level? I feel like if we did some Googling, though, we could say, what level should my 4th grader be at? I mean, you can certainly look at Common Core. Yeah. And it will tell you, but I'm sure you could find of what they should be able to do, but I'm sure you could find Common Core examples from every grade and, try to do some comparison to the word choice and the complexity of sentences. And, maybe that's the way I'm thinking I would approach it.
Yeah. That's been, I agree with you. I think going out there, and I think the internet is a big help here, because I'm sure there, for whatever grade level you're at, there are example essays sitting there or example papers that, drive home what the quality should look like, whether, it's obviously like, oh, here's an elite 8th grader. No, you probably have something that's very generic. That's 1 or 2 pages that will help you.
I'm sure that there is definitely a, Common Core level 8th grade, what they should be able to do.
Yeah. I do a little bit of amateur writing, but, a lot of times it feels like it's like reading the tea leaves. It doesn't make sense sometimes why something is great. But there's this whole body of literature on why stories work and why they don't. But the fact that it's so hard, even by great writers, to actually write a good book or to write a good short story, it's still difficult. So there's no formula. There's an art there. And so I think when you have that for me, like I know a lot of people listening to this, math and science is their scary thing. But me grading composition writing, really that brings, the jitters in. I really struggle on, how do I know if this is good or not? Because I really struggled writing when I was in,
well, how do I know that this
school.
Is the right thing for their age?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I think that's where it's difficult. I don't want to be overly critical.
Exactly.
But I think this is the same case as something that, like, you don't know. Like, Japanese, right? My
Yeah.
kid wants to study Japanese. What's appropriate for a fourth grader if they were learning Japanese? What would they know? I think we would just have to do some research and come up with that. And I'm sure if we looked up what a 12th grade essays should look like, we could find out a lot of key flag indicators that would help us. But, as our children get older, at some point we may not be able to do this by ourselves. We may have to say, this is a great time for a community college class or a tutor to say, I need somebody who can impartially grade these. This is a great time too. If you've got a different homeschool mom, a mom who's already homeschooled 4 children and she's seen a lot of essays, maybe this is a great time to have her take a look at your child's work and give a grade to it, right? Totally impartial. I think that's the other thing. I might be biased, or one of two ways. I'll either be biased to her and think, oh, that's really good. Oh, I'm so proud of her for doing this, or be very harsh because I know she could do better than this, right? So maybe it's good to get a third party. Yeah. Maybe you swap with another mom and you each look at, your children's work if it's something subjective. Not a bad way to go.
Now once you get out there and you figure out, we've gone through the whole list of things, how can I be better at teaching it? Maybe my kid could do it. I can source someone from the outside. I can do all these things. Now we need to track our progress. Are we doing a good job? Are we getting the material into the brain? Are they learning what they're supposed to be learning? How do we track that?
This is a great place to use the standards if you have them. This is a nice time to use assessments if you can find assessments online. Yeah. Depending on what level your child is at, you can use you could use prep materials from if you're talking about high school, you could use prep materials for SAT or PSAT. You could use those to develop tests. I think that there has to be a way to assess and know that, we're doing the right things, right? In subjects we feel comfortable with, we know, oh yeah. And math is easy, right? Is easier because those are easy assessments to take. But if it's something that's more fluid, I think we have to come up with some sort of a metric based on the research that we did about the subject and some way to assess. Maybe it's, samples of 4th grade biology tests or whatever it is. I don't know what year. And you use that and see okay, you would need to look at it and make sure, did I teach all those things? Yeah. Right? It's a good way to know if you're missing anything. And a great way to assess your student about their learning.
Well, and assessments can be scary. I know I'm going through some of the assessments on the Math Mammoth right now with my 6-year-old, and we're on the 1st grade book. We're almost done with the first half of that book. And doing the assessments is kind of scary from a teaching standpoint because it's not only that moment where she gets
a judgment on your skills.
She gets to prove herself, but also it's a judgment on, did we actually learn the material? Did she get what she was doing? And am I good? And there's a little bit of anxiety that this is a moment where it proves whether or not I'm a terrible teacher or not. And well, she got 100% on her math test, so I would say
question is,
it's sort of like that old race car game that when you cross the checkpoint, I got another 30 seconds. Yeah. So she got 100, so I get to do the next test. And then
I think the real test is going to be to assess after a year and see if she still knows it. Yeah. Math is easier because it is building upon itself. Yeah. But ultimately, hopefully these ideas helped you. I think that if you take a strong look at what worries you and why, and you start really digging into the material, I think you'll be surprised. We talked with our friend who was really worried about teaching her son middle school science, and we suggested that she go to the resource center at our local parent partnership and look through middle school science textbooks. And I think she did, and was very surprised at oh, that's not so hard. I feel like these things seem daunting because we have our own kind of past experience with them. I know that if you said I needed to teach chemistry to our daughter, I would get a little bit of anxiety about that because I have memories of it being really hard, me not getting it, having to go for a lot of tutoring and then still barely passing that class, right? I have bad memories of that. But I bet now, as a 30-old adult, that if I looked at a chemistry...
38.
Shush. They don't need to know.
Well,
so as
I married a young one.
Yeah, right.
6 months.
Yeah, that's right. I think if I went to look at a high school chemistry textbook right now, I'd be okay. We were talking about this before we started recording. Like if we went back and looked at these subjects that we remember being kind of traumatic as young adults, we could probably do it now. But just to say like, oh, hey, you're going to be teaching chemistry, I'd be like, oh, whoa. I don't know about this, right? So let's get real with the things. Let's confront our fears and take a good look at the things that scare us and see if we really can teach them. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. We hear this from a lot of parents that they're worried about something, and we suggest that they go out and really take a good look at the curriculums and the textbooks for that. And oftentimes they are surprised. And I bet you somebody out here is listening to this right now is going to be surprised that they really thought, I can't teach blank, and they're look into it. And, will have underestimated themselves.
Yeah, I think the resources that are available now and all the technology that's out there, especially with the YouTube, and I think maybe some of us are approaching it from the standpoint that we think we're going to have to be hovering over their shoulder, walking them through the maze of biology or chemistry or physics, and not realize that a lot of the curriculums are very sophisticated. The workbooks and the example problems are wonderful. There's YouTube channels that are completely devoted to teaching kids those subjects. And I think you'll realize that when we get into those subjects that are really, really difficult, we're going to be more of a coordinator of content and learning and classes and books, as opposed to being the sole teacher. May be the best path for you to get through that very, very tough subject that maybe you have anxiety about. And I think what's exciting about it is that it's an opportunity for you, and I think the biggest one here is to learn. One of the biggest things that I've been enjoying more than anything is learning along with the kids and kind of resparking and revitalizing that interest of learning. I've always been kind of a learning first type of person, but being able to do this has been just, a great renaissance in my own life. Yeah. And I can't wait to get to those, older subjects, and even learning the things I never learned about. I can't remember grammar, things of that nature, right? Yeah. Like I don't even remember being taught that type of stuff. And it's going to be really, really fun to teach it so that I can be an expert and I can actually bring that into my own hobbies and efforts and whatnot. And it just makes you a better person.
Well, and I think you said an important word there, which is expert. Yeah. I feel like you're using that in a positive context, but I think that a lot of folks view that negatively. I can't teach this unless I'm an expert in it. And that is not the case. Teachers everywhere in schools are not the expert in that subject.
A lot of people wing it. That's the dirty secret.
No, that's not what I mean.
A lot of times people put together a good plan. They've done their research. They put together good notes and they execute and present that in a very good way. And a lot of times we are just shocked at people who excel at public speaking, like teachers, like sitting in front of a classroom and talking to 30 kids and teaching them something is an incredible skill to have. It's a very difficult skill. Not everybody can do it. And we look at that and say, wow, they have special knowledge. And it's not, they have a special talent to be able to stand in front of the class and really deliver things in a compelling manner. But you, with your kid, you don't have to worry about the anxiety of teaching 30 kids. You're just teaching the one kid. And a lot of that gets stripped away, and it's really just the information that's coming across. Yeah. And I think we are lost in that mystic element of, standing in front of a class and teaching people and thinking that they have to be an expert. You can easily teach this information. We're not saying you can teach college level classes to your kid, and nobody's going to ask you to do that. But, especially right at the end, like those last 3 years of high school, you're going to get into more challenging subjects. And I think you have to really leverage the fact that your kid's going to be a grown-up kid and they're going to be smart, and you've done a lot of work to lay the groundwork for that. And little Johnny or Alice should be able to, catch the, I remember doing a lot of my own work in high school. My parents weren't standing over my shoulder to tell me to do my homework. We didn't always have good teachers too. Sometimes we had to learn it ourselves. Exactly. I did a lot of that in college, and I know you did too. But I think that this feeling that we have to know it all to teach it. No. If you are a lesson or two ahead of your kid,
as far as you've pre-read those and you're comfortable with it and you
Mm-hmm.
can talk about it. What happens if your child asks a question that's off? You're talking about the basics of this thing and they ask something that's beyond the scope of what was learned in the lesson. That is the perfect time to go, you know what? I don't know about that. Let's go explore. And you can go down that rabbit hole and take a look at that. I don't think we don't need to be chemists to teach chemistry.
Well,
We don't need to be physicists to teach physics,
and
that
I,
kind of thing.
And I love that. I love that line. That's something that the answer of I don't know is always a fearful answer because it's putting your ignorance on display. But in my the corporate world, in my first job, while I had problems, it was one of the things that I learned most in that work environment was not to be afraid to say I don't know.
Yeah.
Because showing the humility is a point of strength. Showing your kids that you don't know everything, but then you're willing to go on the journey with them, I think is the best learning experience in that moment, which says mom or dad is willing to come with me. They don't know everything. They're willing to help me. Let's go find out that information together. Yeah. I think that's one of the best learning things you can pass on to your kids.
Well, and you're showing them those good research skills.
Yeah, exactly.
What would we do? Our daughter
we're all professional Googlers.
That's right. We are.
A PhD in
It's
Google.
amazing. We have so many resources now. I don't think that anybody should be afraid to homeschool based on the fear of not being able to teach a subject with the kind of free resources that we have available.
Exactly.
It's amazing. Our daughter asked us earlier today, she got some silicone baking molds for as a present. And she was asking, Mom, how is silicone made? And I was like, oh, okay, well, let's go find out. And I said, well, probably the easiest way for you to understand it is we'll watch a YouTube video on it. So I found a few videos all about silicone and how they make it. And we watched that whole thing. And now she knows. She was really, and that satisfied that curiosity. We didn't have to go deeper, but we sure could have. We could have looked up more. And our children are still young, so we do use videos a lot. And it's very easy to convey information that way. But I think you're right. This going on the journey with our kids and not feeling like we have to be experts to teach it. Mm-hmm. If there's one thing that you remember going away from this is don't be overwhelmed. Don't underestimate yourself. And don't feel like you have to be an expert. Those are the things that I would like for everybody to really take away. And, we believe in you. You can do it.
Here, and nobody's going to yell at you to use Cliff Notes. Now, let's end it the way we always end it. What we're into, we teased it. We are...
Yes, we are into the Olympics.
Deep into the Peacock app on Roku.
Yeah, we've been watching the Olympics. That's what we're into. And it's been really interesting. We watched, when we're recording this, it was just after the opening ceremonies was yesterday. And we were looking at all the different nations. We had our globe out. And as every nation went by, we were flipping the globe. And it was fun because, it's like, oh, Ecuador. And I said to my daughter, that's in South America. And so she's flipping the globe to South America. And then she's scanning. She's learning to read. She's trying to find Ecuador. So we were taking that opportunity.
She was also reading stuff on the screen.
She was reading things on the screen. It was a really good opportunity. There was a bunch of commentary, right? Because the Olympics is being held in China and there's some different geopolitical things, and Putin attended, and so there was lots of things going on that were like social civics social events.
Like, who's that person?
Yeah, who's that person? Why are they talking about this like this? And so I had to kind of try she's a kinder or first grade type age child. Okay, well, how can I explain the Uyghur minority? Okay, so I'm trying to come up with like the best way to explain different things as we were watching.
It was a good test.
And there's different countries coming out with some of their ceremonial outfits. And so she wanted to know more about those. She's very into fashion and things. And she's like, what is he wearing from Tonga? And so we had to look that up. And he looks cold.
He looks cold.
And shiny and cold. So yeah, we were talking about.
I missed that when the oil guy was back.
That was the oil guy. Yeah, he was back again. Yeah,
I love that guy.
He was all out for it. So we talked about all the countries. We talked about some of the political issues going on. We did some reading. We were looking at the globe, like all these things into the Olympics, and now. Today we were watching some different events. We were watching luge and we were watching ski jumping, and they're talking about how they made the snow. And then she's like, how do you make snow? I was like, okay, so that's another thing. The amount of learning that's going on just by watching these wonderful athletes compete, it's really amazing to teach her, about the accomplishment of these folks. And she's asking like, well, what does it does it take to learn to be this person? And, we're going through all the steps and all the hard work that these folks have put in. And so anyway, it's a really interesting way. It's not just sports. There's just so many other things
A lot of culture
coming into it.
and life and the
Absolutely.
world is all wrapped up into it. It's really cool.
Right. You can't ignore the things that are happening politically, the things that are happening culturally in different areas. And she's very into all the outfits and who's wearing what outfits. It's all about the fashion. And we've talked about how they design outfits for the different teams and how the different outfits look different. Why does this skier wear this one? And the mogul skiers got these patches below their knees. And so we're talking about, and she's asking about judges and scoring and how they make decisions. And she's reading tons of numbers. She's all about scores.
Oh, you're watching the luge one. She says, "Oh, he's in the red. He's -1. He's minus 1.2."
Right. So she's like trying to figure out, that one's green. Okay, so he's good. And she's learning so much. I don't know. It's very intangible, but it's just very stream of consciousness as we watch. So that's what we're into. We're doing some Olympics at our house.
Yeah, it's a great learning experience, and
It's a
all
fantastic
over the
learning.
place. And you'll find little niche that might be different because it is a spectacle. As Ariel has said before, I think she's very into spectacles.
I couldn't stay away from watching. And it's a great celebration of all of these athletes and all their hard work, despite everything else going on, that we can focus on them and celebrate what they've accomplished.
Yep.
And I think it's great to tell her how hard these people worked and how much effort they put into it. And now we all get to watch and celebrate their work and how neat that is.
I also like to, extend to her how hard it is for you to accomplish things, and there's a lot of hard work, and that's something that's good.
Yeah,
for her
she's
to
asking
understand.
like, when did they start skating? And we're like, probably at your age or younger.
You're probably a little younger than
And she
you.
was like, really?
It's okay. I can still get her into javelin.
She's thinking like, oh, she could just do this in 2 years. And it's like, no, these people, they work hard. And there's lots of these little vignettes where they get you to introduce you to the athletes and how hard they're working. And it shows all these montages of them training. And she's getting a new appreciation for, how hard people have worked to become the best at something.
Well, I think it'll be fun too, because I think she might have been a little young for the last Olympics, and this one, maybe the next one will be really nice because she is in gymnastics a lot. She is doing that, so it's going to be really cool for her to see women doing things that she does, every week with her friends, and seeing that at a high level is going to be really cool for her, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's been
so
fun.
we've been into the Olympics, and hopefully you can catch up on some play-by-play on YouTube or something like that if you're listening to this. But it's been a lot of fun for us.
Thanks so much for joining us today and making us a part of your homeschool journey. Please engage with us on social media. Join our Homeschool Together podcast group on Facebook and find us at Homeschool Together Podcast on Instagram. We'd love to hear your feedback, questions, and recommendations. Until next time.
Happy homeschooling!